Welcome, travelers, to my realm of nightmares. Allow me to be your personal assistant. Come in, take a seat, get comfortable. For when you step into my realm, there's no stepping out.
The car was beginning to lose traction on the road. I could hear the engine sputtering and jerking as the tires skidded to a slow crawl, losing its momentum against the tarmac. "Damn it," I muttered as the car came to a complete standstill. Abby in the passenger seat turned to me. "What's wrong with the car?" Nibbling at her lips. Her eyes darted between the wheel and the windshield, staring down the long, dark road. "I don't know," I said shortly, twisting the key in the ignition. The car gave a short, sputtering rumble, then fell completely silent. "Car won't start." Darkness pressed thickly against the windows, the car's headlights too dim to pierce the fog that was encroaching onto the road ahead. "Can't be the battery, since the headlights are still working." "Shall I call someone?" Abby suggested, still glancing nervously out the window. "Sure, if you can get a signal out here. We're practically in the middle of nowhere," I said bitterly, leaning back heavily against the seat. Just our luck to get stranded out here. I had not seen a car pass by us for 45 minutes. And the road itself was empty and quiet. Not a single rumbling engine. In fact, not a whole lot of anything. It was eerily quiet out there. Trees arched on either side of the car, from the woodland that bordered the road, dappling shade over us. "No signal," Abby said with a sigh as she thumbed through her contacts and tried ringing emergency services. "Can't get through to anyone." "Great," I muttered. A bead of sweat formed along my brow, dripping down into my eye. I blinked it away, reaching forward to switch the air conditioning on. The car was stifling with the heat of the evening. Although the sky had quickly darkened beneath the rain clouds, the humidity hadn't disappeared. Abby tried again. I could hear the line disconnecting as soon as it began to ring. "What do we do?" she said, twisting around in her seat, her wide blue eyes staring at me. "Do you think a car will come by and help us?" I shook my head. Nobody uses this road. Looks like we're stuck here until I can get the engine back up and running. Abby dropped her gaze, then turned to look at the trees, casting thin, knotted shadows throughout the swirling mist. I reached for the door handle with a grunt. "Guess I better check the hood. Stay here and keep trying for signal." Abby nodded, and I climbed out of the car, slamming it behind me. The mist was thicker than I expected, creating a strange film over everything. In the car, Abby watched me with wide eyes. The evening was warm, but a low wind was beginning to stir the trees, making them creak and groan like old rotten wood. I cast a brief, curious glance towards the forest, darkness shadowing between the trees. As I popped the hood, a torrent of smoke curled out, and I coughed out a string of curses, wafting air in front of me. "Damn thing's busted," I muttered to myself, kicking the front wheel with the toe of my boot. I immediately grimaced. Just my luck. The passenger door swung open, and Abby stepped out. Her face was awash in a bluish-white glare as she held her phone up. "Can you see what's wrong with it?" I shook my head. "There's a lot of smoke, but I can't tell where it's coming from. I don't get it." She bit her lip. "I've tried dialing emergency services, but it won't connect. I thought I might have better luck if I try walking a little." I eyed her carefully. "Don't go too far," I said. "I don't like this mist." She nodded, flicking another nervous glance into the trees before walking slowly in the opposite direction of the car, holding her phone aloft. I returned my attention to the car. What the hell was wrong with it? There hadn't been any warning signs flashing up on the dashboard. and the car had no trouble like this before. It was like it just broke down for no apparent reason. And in the worst place, too. All we could do was wait for another car to pass us by and hope they stopped to help us. Otherwise, we're stuck here. I glanced up at the sky, only partially visible through the canopy. The clouds looked full of rain. The road ahead was obscured by mist, but there were no faint twinkling lights to suggest we were near a town or village. We seemed to be a long way off from anything out here. The soft crunch of Abby's shoes against the tarmac began to fade into silence, and I glanced up to see how far she'd gone. The mist had completely enveloped her. I could no longer see nor hear her. "Abby?" I called sharply, my voice sounding strangely muted. "Abby, don't go too far. This fog's getting thicker." When she didn't respond, I felt my heart thumb beneath my chest. It could be that she was too far away to hear me, but what if something happened to her? With this fog, both my hearing and vision were compromised. Leaving the car behind me, I moved forward into the mist, squinting to see the vague shape of someone walking ahead of me. "Abby," I called again, hoping my voice reached her. A hand suddenly dropped onto my shoulder, and I spun around, startled. Abby staring back at me, her cheeks a strangely pale shade beneath the darkening sky. "Max, what's wrong?" she said, her breath pluming in front of her. Now that I was in the mist, the humidity from before had sped away, and a faint chill touched my skin. "Abby, I swiveled my head back to the road ahead, where I thought I had seen someone walking. If it wasn't Abby, then who else was out there? "You thought what?" Abby prompted, a nervous clamor to her voice. Nothing. Let's go back to the car. It's dangerous being on the road in this fog." She nodded, her eyes lingering for a second over my shoulder before following me back to the car. As soon as we were back inside the vehicle, I engaged the door's locks. Abby shot me a panicked look, but I reassured her with a wave. "Just a precaution. There might be wild animals out there," I said, hoping my voice didn't communicate my uncertainty. The figure in the mist? It could have just been a shadow. Mine, or Amy's, distorted by the night. But that didn't seem right. I was convinced there had been someone walking ahead of me. And if we weren't alone out here, I hadn't seen or heard any vehicles, so I had no idea who they could have been. It started raining shortly after. The rhythmic drum of water against the roof of the car was slowly building an ache behind my eyes, and Abby was beginning to grow frustrated and anxious by a lack of cell phone signal. We couldn't call for any help, yet we were stuck here until someone happened to drive by. But given the late hour, it was growing more unlikely by the minute. "I hope someone comes soon," Abby said, wringing her hands nervously in her lap. "I hate being stuck out here." She glanced out the window, the glass obscured by the gullies of rainwater. "Maybe we could get out and see if there are any horses nearby. That might—" "No," I interrupted quickly. "I think we're best staying in the car." Abby studied me closely, her eyes wide. "Why? Did you see something out there?" I shook my head, not quite meeting her eyes. I didn't want to worry her even more than she already was, and I wasn't entirely sure what I'd seen. "No, but like I said before, there could be animals out there. Plus, it's dark and it's raining. I don't want you to catch a chill or get lost." Abby went quiet, looking down at her hands. "I guess you're right." The two of us fell silent, listening to the steady thrum of rain pattering against the tarmac outside. "What was that?" Abby's startled cry made my head snap up, and I followed as she worked frantically at the window with her sleeve, cleaning away the condensation that had formed on the glass. "What?" She peered intently through the window, clenching her hands into fists. I thought I saw something. In between the trees." She trailed off, her breathing hitching as a shadow appeared at the tree line, darting towards us on all fours. "It's just a deer," I said as the animal skittered across the road, its eyes wide and glassy with fear as it disappeared into the tree opposite. Who knows what animals live out here? Abby nodded mutely, keeping her eyes on the shadow by the car. I could see from her fidgeting that she was growing anxious about staying in the car. But I couldn't risk getting lost out there, especially in the dark. There was no natural light out here, and other than the muted glare of the headlamps, I had no light source on me. The rain continued to lash at the car, striking the window and drumming against the roof. It was starting to lull me into a doze, and every now and then I would jolt awake, disoriented and confused. "Do you think any cars are going to come by?" Abby asked in a small voice. I hesitated to answer, given how long we'd been out here already, and the generally untouched state of the road. I doubted we'd be getting out of here before morning. But I didn't want to worry her, and there was also the possibility a truck driver might use this road on the way into town. "I don't know," I eventually said. "Why don't you get some rest? I'll wake you up if anything changes." She nodded, but didn't close her eyes, a flash of paranoid anxiety crossing through her features every now and then. I wasn't sure what she was expecting to see, but it was starting to put me on edge too, almost as if there were things watching us from the darkness of the trees. Every time I turned my head, I thought I saw something move in my periphery, a figure stalking through the trees, but I figured it was probably just my own imagination and Abby's paranoia putting me on edge. "I think there's something out there." I turned to her, my throat going dry. "You're probably just seeing things," I said. "No," she said. "It looks like someone's watching us from the trees." I clicked my tongue, shifting over to look through her window. "Where?" She lifted a hand and pointed into the woods, her cheeks clammy and pale. "There. See? It looks like there's something standing there, between the trees. I saw them move." I stared hard at where she was pointing, and then I saw it. A shadow, tall and humanoid. The moment I looked at it, I felt it staring back. I cursed softly. "Don't worry, whoever it is, they'll probably move on." "They can't get in, can they?" Abby said, her voice tight with fear. "No, the doors are locked. We're fine if we stay here." Do you think they'll try anything?" "I don't know," I snapped, pinching the bridge of my nose. "I'm sorry, Abby. I want to get out of here just as much as you do. I don't know who they are or what they want, but I'm sure they'll leave soon. Try not to pay them notice." She nodded, turning back to look the other way, but I couldn't help glance at them every few seconds. They were getting closer, creeping through the trees towards the car. This time, I knew I wasn't seeing things. My own paranoia began to kick in. What if Abby's fears were right, and they really did try something? What if they attacked the car? We were in the middle of nowhere with a broken down car. It was misty and dark. Nobody would be able to see or hear us out here. Anything could happen. It was just like those stories on the news. People going missing, cars left at the side of the road, no evidence left behind. What really happened to them? Would we be like that? Disappear without a trace? "Hey, are those headlights?" Abby gasped, sitting up in her seat. I jerked at the sound of her voice, snapping me out of my thoughts. The rumble of a car engine cut through the rain, and the potent glare of the car's headlamps sliced the mist ahead of us. "You're right. If I flash my lights, maybe they'll stop." Abby nodded, glancing warily at the forest. I followed her gaze, trying to see if the figure was still watching us, but they were gone. A vehicle pulled up beside us through the mist. The driver rolled down the window. A man in a police uniform poked out his head, rain dampening his hair almost immediately. "You folks all right?" I cranked down my window and shouted to be heard over the rain. "Hey there, sir. Our car broke down, and we've got no signal. Think you could help us out?" The officer scratched his head, his eyes darting warily around the car. "Sure thing. How long you been stranded out here?" "Probably more than an hour. We thought we'd never see another car." The officer chuckled weakly. Yeah, this road's a little out of the way for most folks around here. Say, I don't think we'll get your car back on the road tonight, but I can give you a lift home and call someone over to look at your car in the morning. How's that sound? Abby and I exchanged a glance, relief flooding our features. Sounds great. Thank you, officer. I really thought we'd be sitting here all night. The two of us hurried out of the car, locking the doors behind us, and dashed through the rain to the police car, climbing into his back seats. Lucky for you, I was coming this way, the officer said as the front wipers moved furiously across the windshield. It's a bad road, this one. Most people stay clear of it. Why is that? Abby asked, shivering next to me. The officer shook his head, steering back onto the road. I glanced back at our car one last time as it disappeared beyond the mist, hoping that it would still be there in the morning. It's one of those strange ones, you know. Lots of folks go missing out here for no reason that we can gather. Cars end up crashing, people disappearing. It has a really bad local rep. Abby shot an alarmed glance my way, but I chose not to meet it. My fears before weren't that unfounded after all. Anything could have happened to us out here, and nobody would have known. All I can say is I'm glad you chose this night to drive down here. Who knows what might have happened otherwise, I muttered. The officer gave another dry laugh, and Abby clenched her fists in her lap. I glanced out the window, watching the woods pass by. As the car slewed up the road, the tires skidding over the wet tarmac, the headlamps cut through the mist, and I glimpsed a face staring out from the trees. It was only a brief glance, smeared by mist and rain, but I had seen someone there, a man staring at me from between the trees, with black eyes and a pale ashen face. And, for a second, it looked like there was another shadow towering over him from behind, long, twisted fingers reaching for him. Then, it was swallowed by the mist and darkness, and the car drove on. Tonight's story was called Haunted Highway by Hair-Raising Narratives. If you enjoyed this, chances are you'll enjoy the content over on his channel. The links to this story, his channel, and all of his other social medias will be in the description below. Hey, did you know I have merch? Well, I do. Crazy, right? But if you like to walk around, representing my realm and gaining me new travelers, the links to my merch store as well as all of my other social medias will be in the description below. As always, I'd like to say a special thank you to all my lovely Patreons. 242 reads. Seraphine, the Midnight Bard. Creepy Clown Girl. Mia Mina. Philia Noctis. Hair-Raising Narratives. Spooky Boo's Scary Story Time. Lycan Trucker. Nathaniel Nelson. And Pimp Demon. If you'd like to join these lovely travelers but I'll light my fire, you can do so by becoming a Patreon as well. Just remember the support is always appreciated but never expected. Please don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, and ding that bell for future content if you're new, as it will really help push this video into the algorithm and helps the channel grow.
But as always, travelers, once you step into my realm, there's no stepping out.